Hello, good morning. Slightly better morning now. Wasn't a good morning 10 minutes ago when I put all the washing on the line and the heavens opened, but the garden needs it. So, the races were really good. Thank you very much to everyone that asked. We went to Southwell races yesterday, didn't win a penny. Well, Jono did. He won, I think, £3.60, which then put him like 20 quid down overall. We didn't win anything, but it was a really lovely day. And they did it, it was the family day out. They did it really well. So thank you, Southwell Racecourse, for hosting such a wonderful day. And well done to all the jockeys and the horses. And we are clearly not very good at this horse racing malarkey, but I will be getting the Racing Post because I found it quite interesting. So today, back to business. And there's a lot going on. And the headline at the minute is, well, there's two sort of quite important headlines. There's Torsten Bell and conspiracy theories. So let's start with Torsten Bell. I have a little nickname for him, which you can probably work out yourself. Torsten Bell is being lined up to replace Rachel Reeves. He's another one that's never actually done a day in business. He's another one that hasn't got a clue. He's another one that is economically illiterate and has been historically slammed for all of his economic policies. But here he is being lined up to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Amazing. Now, that sort of links in with my conspiracy theory chat in a minute, but let's stick with Torsten Bell for now. This is a personal anecdote of Torsten. So my daughter and I went to the House of Lords to watch a debate on VAT on education. We went to watch it being debated whether we should be imposing VAT on education, and Torsten Bell was there for the Labour Party. He spent most of it looking quite bored, writing notes which I don't think had anything to do with VAT on education on it. And his responses were the usual cut and paste responses that you would have got from the Department for Education. So he was basically speaking Bridget's words, speaking Rachel's words. He didn't really have any gumption of himself. But at one point, as I'm sat there with my 13-year-old, he made a statement and my daughter turned around to me and said, "Mummy, he's just said he doesn't care about me, hasn't he?" I said, yeah, he has. He's just said that he only cares about the 93% of children in state education. And I said, yes, that's exactly what he said. That's what Bridget Phillipson says. That's what Rachel Reeves said. And she sat there as one of the 7% with special educational needs and is neurodivergent and has just heard from the horse's mouth that her education doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine collateral damage as far as Torsten Bell's concerned, because he says the numbers add up, and by adding VAT on education it would be better for the greater good, and that 7%, screw you, you're just not important. And he didn't say screw you, but they were the words. And my daughter was incensed, and rightly so. And she was one of a few children there, and he couldn't make eye contact with her, and she absolutely was giving him the lasers, and he couldn't even bring himself to look at her, and he exited through the back door. Now, that tells me everything I need to know about Torsten Bell. The fact that he doesn't understand what has now become one of the worst manifesto pledges that the Labour government came up with, because the VAT on education policy has proven itself more than one time or two times over that it has not raised any money, and it's been a complete flop, both financially and educationally for the entire nation. But Torsten Bell backed it. But now this man, who has not had a day in business, is being lined up to be the next Chancellor. And if you have a look on any of the X or the social media, you will see a lot of his back catalogue of ideas and what he would do if he was in the job. And I mean, it almost makes Rachel Reeves look as though she's sort of like maybe understood how to turn the calculator on. He's not even at that stage yet. So that fills me with absolute fear, which brings me on to the conspiracy theory bit. Now, this is something normally I'm a bit dismissive about. I don't like a conspiracy theory. I think effectively they're for people that want to sound as though they know what they're talking about. And I've never really signed up to them for lots of reasons, but also because in the conspiracy theory, drawer, there are some actual credible theories, but because there are so many outlandish ones, it completely overshadows the credible ones, and then they sort of get pushed aside as a conspiracy theory when they have merit. And there are a few that are travelling around, not mainstream media, because of course they're not going to report on this, but are travelling around the non-mainstream media, which are credible. And they link entirely to Blair's Civil Contingencies Act of 2004. Now, lots of people are saying on X and political commentators, but it hasn't got its way to mainstream media yet, that the way that the Labour government is punishing us in absolutely our entirety, both financially, emotionally, with our stability, with our homes, with our pensions, with our education, with absolutely every part of the societal construct, that this is planned. And this is planned to possibly push civil unrest. And then if there is civil unrest, we can stop another general election. That's the nuts and bolts of it. So the nuts and bolts of it are, the headline is, we're being pushed in this direction so that there won't be a general election in 2029. Now, I don't know where I stand on that. It seems a bit far-fetched, but it also seemed a bit far-fetched to have a government come into power who said they weren't going to raise taxes and raise council tax, etc., 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 and have done everything and have not acknowledged it. I mean, if you'd have said last year, if you'd have shown the clips of all the lies and said this is what's going to happen, you'd have said, don't be ridiculous, that's AI. That's like the Nigel Farage Garage film. You know, that's not real. That's somebody's made that up with AI. It's real. It's happened. So I'm beginning to think, well, hang on a mo. And I did get the information where the UK is preparing for some mass disaster. Now, that's not uncommon. You know, that often happens. And that is preparation. And, you know, many people would argue, well, we were prepared to an extent with COVID. We weren't prepared enough, but we were prepared. So there's a very good counter argument of this is not necessarily unusual. But why it is hitting the headlines a bit at the minute is it's happening very much under the cover of darkness. It's very cloak and dagger. There's, you know, the amount of money that's being put into this is not being shared widely with the greater public. It's there for you to find if you want to look for it, but it's not being shared. Why not? Why is that not being shared with us? And then we have headlines that what Rachel Reeves has done to hospitality is worse than what happened to hospitality in lockdown. And the damage she has done with her taxes has caused a wider, much more significant impact than lockdown did. Yet she's still Chancellor of the Exchequer. So we've got the actual facts and figures now backing up her failures. But we're not doing anything about it. And it's this latent not doing anything about it that I think is sparking the flashlights in people's minds of, it's so obvious. I mean, we're living this economic doom loop, and yet they're pretending it's still okay. And that does sound very questionable. And if you look at the Civil Contingencies Act, the Act allows the de facto imposition of martial law, the seizure of property and assets, the freezing of bank accounts, and the cancellation of elections. Now, the first part, you know, a million miles off that. I might be watching this back in a year and go, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. But I would say we're a million miles off that. But the cancelling of elections, well, we've already cancelled local elections. Do you remember? And we're now putting our local councils into super councils. So we are, again, de facto cancelling elections because we're now making the smaller councils null and void, and they're now a bigger council. Well, why are we doing that? Why are we wanting super councils? And then you start to see that the conspiracy theory has a shred of credibility. Going on to digital ID, you know, it's all beginning to make sense. So my question is to Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, because he's quite good with his behind-the-scenes video, Nigel Farage, when he's not doing his garage movie. We need this discussed in Parliament. We need this outed. We need this on the table. We need this in mainstream media. We need this on the BBC, ITV, Sky, Channel 4, Channel 5, Press Association, all of the news channels. We need this being discussed, because if it is just a conspiracy theory and just rubbish, brilliant. Say so. You know, let's have it debunked. Let's have it put aside and move on to the real issues of the world. And if it's not, then we really do need to be discussing it.